yeah. But the other racial issue, and this is part of what I wanted to talk about, is that it was very difficult psychologically to deal with the fact that there were two types of explanations of why blacks were low status and low income and low education in academia at that time. One was that blacks were on average less intelligent than whites, and that turned out to be a bunch of nonsense research, which really any unbiased second year psych student could have recognized was crap if they'd really looked at it
Yeah,
openly. And the second was that black culture had been destroyed by slavery. Um, and neither one of those was true, but I was in a culture where those were prevalent beliefs, and particularly the IQ stuff. There was Jensen at Harvard, and I just forget his name, the most eminent psychologist in England, were also these people who pushed this IQ stuff. And to just say one thing, um, Jensen, I don't know whether it was Jensen or the other man, who published publications about the IQ of supposedly IQ and genetics, IQ among identical twins. And there was this correlation. And let's say there was one sample size, it was like 23. And then there was a sample size that, let's say, was 27. Then
uh,
there was a sample size that was, say, was 33. And the reported correlation as being the same to 3 decimal places. It's like anybody who knows anything about statistics knows that's impossible.
yeah, yeah,
I mean, it doesn't make any logical sense. So there I was with people believing in this stuff, and I'm a graduate student, and it's like, I'm like, this is total crap,
you
you
know,
know?
yeah,
But as a black person, I can't say this is total crap because I don't know how to prove it's total crap.
yeah. Well,
But
you had sent something to me. We had a bit of
yeah,
correspondence before this interview, and you'd made reference to the fact that you kind of struggled with that
oh
as a
yeah,
graduate student because you were, you were trained in the canons of science
yeah,
and believed in science as a valid path to
yeah,
knowledge, and yet you were getting this stuff that just so conflicted with what you intuitively knew.
yes,
And so interestingly, just last night I was
yes,
listening to Neil deGrasse Tyson,
yes, right.
the the
It's wonderful.
yeah, he's a wonderful astrophysicist, and I was watching a masterclass.com, that he was talking about, and he was talking about scientific thinking and the kinds of bias that can get in the way
Right.
of scientific thinking. And one of the things that he talked about was cultural bias, and
Yes.
how unconsciously people of goodwill and high intelligence can be biased in ways that they're unaware of.
Well, let me tell you about something else that bothered me about psychology in the 1960s and 1970s. Now, when I went to UC Davis, about half the psychologists there believed the stuff that blacks were on average less intelligent than whites. And I was contrary to that. And I wrote a paper where I reviewed uh, Kahneman's The Science and Politics of IQ. And I reviewed it by checking all of his references and checking all of the references of Arthur Jensen and this British psychologist, and talking about where there was bias and where there was not bias. And I gave a talk on that in psychology, and the faculty said they found my talk very confusing.
They said what?
But they found my talk very confusing.
Huh.
And I was like, this is not confusing. What the hell's going on there?